What's up, guys? Razio here. And about 5 years ago, around this time, I made one of my first YouTube videos ever, which was about Blood Death Knight balance in World of Warcraft Legion. And we have come full circle, because the video today is going to be about Blood Death Knight balance again, but this time in World of Warcraft Shadowlands, about 3 to 4 weeks away from patch 9.1. What's messed up about it, and what I would do to fix it. So let's go.
I am Razio.
So here we are again, ladies and gents. Another Death Knight balance video. Man, it's been a while since I've done any kind of video like this. Now, if you're unfamiliar, one of the first videos I had ever made was regarding the terrible state of Blood Death Knights in World of Warcraft Legion, the launch of the expansion, all kinds of shenanigans happening, Bone Shield being taken away by dot ticks, aura ticks on bosses, terrible talents, all kinds of shit. And you know what? It's still bad. Blood Death Knights are still not in a great place, but nowhere near as bad as they were in Legion. They're still capable of doing all the content, which was not quite the case in the beginning of Legion because of the issues that they had. Anyway, we're going to talk about Blood Death Knight balance. What's wrong with it? What's fundamentally broken with the class? And of course, what I would do to fix this issue if I had the power to do so. Now, if you're just barely hit level cap, which right now is level 60, in World of Warcraft Shadowlands as a Blood Death Knight, you will probably notice that you're extremely slow. Your haste is really low. You're about as fast as a paraplegic trying to go uphill in a wheelchair, which is why you try to find gear with haste on it. The best stats for the Blood Death Knight currently are haste and versatility. Now, that in and of itself is a huge problem, and I'm going to explain why. Versatility is one of the most boring stats in the game, and quite frankly, if I had my way, I would put versatility as a tertiary stat, a stat that no one gives a shit about, and it's just a nice little bonus whenever it comes up on a piece of gear, much the way Leech and Avoidance is now. That's what versatility should be, in my opinion. They need to replace versatility with something else, but I'd be fine if they just got rid of it altogether, because everybody in the game, every class in the game, crit does the exact same thing for every class, haste does the exact same thing for every class, versatility does the exact same thing for every class. Mastery is where the core of design should come from, because every class and every spec's mastery does something different. But Blood Death Knight's mastery got gutted quite a while ago. Back in the day of Warlords of Draenor and Mists of Pandaria and things like that, the size of the blood shield that mastery would create was absurd. It was broken, it was way overpowered. But in the typical Blizzard fashion, they swung the pendulum very much in the opposite direction. Now mastery is virtually worthless. It's pretty terrible, and I highly recommend not stacking mastery because it's just bad. In my opinion, mastery, the effects of the blood shield should be doubled at least to what they are now, because it's pretty bad. The multiplier is pretty bad. The blood shield we get now is insanely low and not even noticeable. The shield you get from a really strong death strike isn't even enough to completely absorb a single standard auto attack from a boss. It's that bad. Even if you stack mastery, it's likely not going to absorb a single hit. So it's pointless. So what would I do about this? Well, it ties in to our other big problem. Blood Death Knights right now have the lowest damage of all the tanks in the game. Our damage is ridiculous. And I know in 9.1 we're seeing a 6% buff to all of our skills. Everything we do, 6% damage increase. And in typical Blizzard fashion, this is just a band-aid on a, fractured fucking leg with the bone poking out of the skin. That's what Blizzard is really, really good at. They're good at fixing problems that don't exist and at putting band-aids on fatal wounds. So you could solve this instantly because Mastery also increases our attack power as a Blood Death Knight. If they simply fix the scaling on Mastery so we would go after Mastery gear instead, it would automatically fix how much damage we're doing, because stacking Mastery would increase our attack power natively, and therefore there would be no need for these huge blanket buffs on damage, which quite frankly the 6% is nowhere near enough. They should have done something in the realm of 10 to 16% for us to catch up to other tanks' damage, but they're not going to do that. We know they're not going to do that. They're going to continue putting band-aids on, much like they have since, you know, pretty much everybody with 2 brain cells to rub together left Blizzard forever ago. Back when Blizzard was still Blizzard, essentially, and now it's Activision. But anyway, let's get back on topic here. So, we know that our stat, Mastery, is a huge problem. Another way you can realize this is a huge fucking problem is the fact that still, even after 9.1, after they're doing the thing on PvP armor, where PvP armor is has an item level, but it's higher item level when activated in PvP, still didn't change the fact that for Death Knight tanks, the most efficient and quickest and best gear to get as a tank is still PvP gear, because it's where you can pick haste versatility gear. Haste and versatility gear is exceedingly rare in Mythic Plus, and in raids there are very few pieces that drop that way. So if you want all haste versatility gear, you need to go to the PvP vendor and buy it. If you'll notice here, a lot of my gear here is PvP gear. Quite a bit is PvP gear, because it's what is best by far, hands down. Haste versatility is the best way to get it. Now, why Blizzard did this with PvP gear is beyond me. Oh, I know why, because they're fucking stupid. But let's digress. So here's the fix. Versatility is just a tertiary stat from this point on. Just a lucky roll if you get it. Just, you know, for a little extra damage, a little extra survivability, but you can't chase it. Can't chase versatility. They buff the Mastery, make it useful, make it what we go after, haste Mastery gear. And then on top of that, add resilience back on PvP gear. That way, no one who exclusively PvEs will feel any need to get PvP gear. There'll be no need to artificially inflate item level of PvP gear, because resilience is a great system. Also, another thing they can do is they could bring back reforging. If you're unfamiliar with what reforging is, it used to be able to, back in the day, you get a piece of gear, let's say like this. See, this is versatility Mastery. If I didn't want Mastery or versatility, I could go to the vendor and reforge it, and it would take half of any stat and add half of any other stat that I wanted. So, for example, if I did it to the 42 versatility, it would change that to having 21 versatility and then 21 of any stat that I chose. That was a great way to not feel like shit when you get gear that isn't really your best stats, but it doesn't feel like a complete waste because you can reforge it and still get some use out of it. Blizzard says the excuse back then that they got rid of reforging was because it essentially just caused an extra step, and it would make people roll on way too many items that they normally wouldn't roll on. But now that everything's personal loot, that's no longer an issue. You can't roll on gear, it just fucking drops personally. So that issue's gone. I am of the belief that the reason they removed reforging is because people would get to the item level / gear that they felt good enough about and take a break from the game. And we all know that Activision is all about increasing player hours. That's what I believe is the real reason why reforging was removed, but it needs to come back. It was a fantastic system. It was great. It made all gear somewhat useful if you got it, potentially. But anyway, so that's what I would fix with the stats, and that would all automatically fix a lot of the issues DKs have. I mean, just having haste fix your rune regeneration issues, but the other issues that we have is runic power, and that's of course tied in to our talents and our abilities. Not enough of our abilities generate runic power for start, so I would add more runic power generation through abilities. Maybe even every time you lose a stack of a bone shield, you get runic power, much in the same way every time a warrior is hit, he gains rage. That would help dramatically. But our talents are pretty lackluster. And I know what one of the first things people are going to say about this whole situation is, why are you taking tombstones? Because I was running some tests with the buffed legendary, the dancing rune weapon, crimson rune weapon legendary, and I've got to say I've got some pretty good results, because outside of that, tombstone is a useless piece of shit talent that no one ever uses. But I'll go into more details about that later. Death Knights are definitely one of the tanks that almost every fight you go into, you're going to want some Tomes of Steel Mind so you can swap around your talents, because you're going to want to change them pretty frequently. But our talents definitely leave a lot to be desired. In the first tree, Heartbreaker is generally taken anytime you're fighting more than one target. Why? For runic power. You don't get any more damage out of it. It's just a little bit more runic power. Single target, everyone generally tends to take Blood Drinker, but Tombstone was never ever taken. Just look at WoW logs, no one ever takes it. But I've been running some math experiments with that and the Crimson Rune Weapon Legendary that recently got buffed, and I'm finding out some pretty cool things that essentially, when you take away Bone Shield stacks with Tombstone, it counts towards this legendary effect I found out. And so I've been running some tests, and I'm going to test it in Mythic Plus and test it in some raids. On a target dummy, it was doing so was pushing out more damage and more runic power generation on both triple target and single target fights. But again, that's a target dummy. I want to see how it performs in real time before I make any decisions about that. But anyway, rapid decomposition, never taken. Why? Because hemostasis is insanely good. Consumption is the ability from the Legion relic that no one, again, ever fucking takes, because it's nowhere near as competitive as this situation. Now, what would I do when a talent is that way? I'll get to that in a minute, because there's another talent in this row that's just like that. Val Bulwark, no one ever uses. It's completely dead in the water, trash tier talent. Relish in Blood and Blood Tap are the two they take. Blood Tap, if you can master it, it takes a much higher skill level of skill to play perfectly, but if you can master Blood Tap, you're gonna get a little more damage and survivability than you would out of Relish in Blood. But Relish in Blood almost does the exact same thing, the exact same returns passively, so most people are going to end up taking Relish in Blood. Here we walk into another issue, Will of the Necropolis. Will of the Necropolis is so fucking good, it's necessary. It's so necessary that you don't even pay attention to these. They've tried redesigning Mark of Blood several expansions. Anti-Magic Barrier is a great talent, but doesn't hold a candle to Will of the Necropolis. And again, I'll get back to Hemostasis and Will of the Necropolis in a minute. Wraithwalk is generally what you're always going to use in raids. In Mythic Plus, you're going to use Grip of the Dead. Tightening Grasp is completely useless. Taking 30 seconds off of a Gorfine's Grasp is dumb. Most enemies in the raid are immune to Gorfine's, and you still use Gorfine's Grasp quite a bit in Mythic Plus, but since Mythic Plus, the entire point of the fucking piece of content, is to kite, this is your only option. Grip of the Dead slows everything that your Death and Decay hits. That's legitimately your only option. Next tier, Death Pact. No one ever takes this as Blood. It's a PvP talent for Frost and for Unholy. No one ever uses this for Blood. Again, dead in the water. Bloodworms is great, and generally people will take it. The only time Bloodworms is not good is if you are in situations where you are consistently dropping below 50% health, which there's a handful of bosses like that, such as in Castle Nathria, such as Sludge Fist, Cider Nathrius. You're going to fall below fairly often, and it loses its viability there because they don't ever get up long enough to heal you and to have enough bloodworms up to actually trigger. So in a lot of cases, in those situations, people will take Voracious, which is you just heal more and get Leech every time you Death Strike. Both these talents are good. I think they're fine. You get more DPS out of Bloodworms. What I would do to even make Voracious more competitive is also increase Death Strike's damage a little bit with this. Death Pact needs to be removed and replaced with something else. It's absolute trash. Here, all three of these talents are good. Purgatory you're generally going to take in really high Mythic Plus keys and in progression rating where the chances of you dying are high. Red Thirst almost every other time. Bone Storm AoE is an AoE, right? Now, again, I've mentioned several times that Right now, Death Knights have a really hard time gaining runic power. Even me as a Blood Elf who can Arcane Torrent and gain, an extra 20 runic power every 2 minutes. Other classes, races can't do that. So this is super useful. But again, Red Thirst is generally what people are going to run after stuff's not on prog anymore. The chances of you dying are really low because it just gives you your vampiric blood cooldown back faster. Bone Storm is awesome on large packs like in Mythic Plus, but it has one fatal flaw. You need to gain 100, you need to pool 100 runic power, which is already hard for a lot of us to get, before you use it. If you use it at under 100 runic power, you're wasting it because you're not going to get its full benefit. So what I would change about Bone Storm is one of two options. One, Bone Storm needs to be, if it's going to keep its runic power cost the way it functions now, it needs to be a baseline ability. It shouldn't be a talent. If it's going to cost 100 runic power to be effective, and this something else should be replaced here. If they keep it as a talent, they just need to keep it as is, but have it always not require any runic power to use, and it always does the full 10-second duration. And then it will be competitive and something people pick up in things like Mythic Plus or big pack pulls on trash in raids. But right now, because you have to pool, as you're pooling runic power, that means you're not death striking, which means you're not surviving, which means you're dying, which is a huge problem, especially in higher keys in Mythic Plus. Even plus 15s, this would be great if you didn't have to spend runic power. Now to the crux, okay? If you have a talent row where it doesn't matter what other talents are there because it's mandatory, what that ultimately means are things like Hemostasis and Will of the Necropolis. At this point, need to be baseline. They need to be part of the Death Knight standard passive kit, and then replace them with something that's going to make these competitive and more interesting. There are a lot of places they can draw from, old talent trees going all the way back from Wrath of the Lich King, where there were some really unique things that they could put in there to do something. So Mark of Blood would be fantastic if you're off tanking or tanking and you throw it on a boss and get a little more passive healing. Or you throw it on anti-magic barrier. If you're going into a fight where there's huge amounts of magic damage that you're going to be taking, you take that. And then Will of the Necropolis should be replaced with something else. Hemostasis should be baseline. And then you can pick between, these are all straight DPS increasers. Consumption can stay if hemostasis is no longer there. Rapid decomp can stay if hemostasis is no longer there. And then we put something else there, right? But our talents are still pretty fucking cookie cutter, like most classes are right now. I mean, I'm switching between these three fairly often in content. This one and this one fairly often. I'm always here unless I'm doing Mythic Plus, that I'm there. This never changes ever under any circumstance. This never changes under any other circumstance. I'll sometimes switch between these two because Blood Tap can be fun to game. Balboark is never touched. Tombstone up to this point has never been touched by any Blood Decay ever, but this new legendary buff is making me fuck around with it and see what I can break the game with it a little bit. But you're always going to pick between these two most of the time. Single target Blood Drinker, multi-target Heartbreaker. It wouldn't be as big of a necessity if they added more ways to gain runic power. For example, Blood Boil should maybe give us a little bit of runic power depending on how many targets we hit, right? Heart Strike does give runic power. That's really one of our only runic power generators, right? Is runic power and when Death and Decay procs from Relish in Blood. That's how we gain runic power. And my Arcane Torrent. Runic power is really, 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 really hard to get as a DK. There's just not enough things. I also think you should get runic power and you get hit. I mean, if we look through our actual book here, oops, wrong book. Pocket-doodle shit. Come in here, and you'll see that if we look at the passives, so there's Blood Shield. It's terrible. That needs to buff into Mastery. Ossuary used to be a talent. It's good that they made it baseline because it makes our Death Strikes cheaper to use. But there are really no good ways to generate runic power, which is why everyone right now, this legendary can be so good because when you use Dancing Rune Weapon, you're going to get more rune regeneration. And when you use, that's why I'm fucking around with Tombstone, you get 6 runic power per bone shield you absorb. So that's a lot of runic power on a 1 minute cooldown. The other thing is most people are taking this legendary right now. Let me find it. Here, it's here. Strength Soaked Breastplate. Why? Because it's a small DPS increase, but the biggest reason is because it puts Frost Fever. And Frost Fever and Virulent Plague are going to hit like a wet pool noodle. They don't hit hard, but the reason you have it is because Frost Fever has a chance every time it ticks to give you some runic power. That's the only reason people are taking this. If people are picking a legendary because it's the only way to make your class function correctly, that's a fucking problem. And so that's what I would do to change things up. Those are the biggest problems and the biggest issues I have with Blood Death Knights right now. Just constantly putting band-aids and just doing blanket buffs of, oh, all Blood DK abilities get a 6% damage boost is retarded. Quite frankly, it's retarded. And I think people need to reevaluate at Blizzard of what the fuck they're doing, because Blood DK survivability needs to go up, the damage needs to go up, and runic power generation to go up, and they need to fix the stats. Come on, if the mastery is the most unique stat on every class and spec, if it's useless to you, that means that whoever designed the class needs to get their fucking head checked. Anyway, guys, those are my thoughts on the Blood DK balance right now. We're a few weeks away from 9-1. I know I give a lot of shit. I am having fun in WoW and in WoW TBC. I am still playing Final Fantasy XIV as well. I just don't stream it as often, and because it's in a huge content lull too. You know, Blizzard tends to seem to think that extending bullshit out, such as removing reforging and other things, is going to make people play longer, when in reality, you know what makes people play your game, Blizzard? Putting out fucking content. It's the longest content lull ever for a regular patch. And I know COVID-19 and all that stuff, but get fucked. I don't care. I'm sick of the excuses. Anyway, guys, if you liked the video, give me a thumbs up. It helps a lot. And subscribe if you haven't subscribed. If you don't want to subscribe and hate the video, that's fine. You can give it a thumbs down, but then you can go fuck yourself. Everybody, don't forget, keep it real.